Hey, it's Sue Greenwald here with Awakened Stories. I'm here today with Deanna Carr of the Mystical Moonlight. Hey, Dee, how are you?
I'm doing good today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Today's surprise topic is going to be Egyptian gods and goddesses, okay? And just a little bit about the time of Egypt. So Dee never knows what we're going to talk about, and things always change too. So
Yeah.
yay. All right. So in my opinion, the reign of Egypt was really, really a long time. So there was a lot of different, probably factions and power. But,
Mhm.
when we think of Egypt, we think of pyramids, temples, and the gods with the little animal heads or whatever. And so let's start with the basic question. Was Egypt always a desert?
No, no.
Okay.
It was very luscious. It was thriving. They had plants. Um, they had water. So what we see today is definitely just a remnant of what once was. Most of it has been buried. So I mean, you have to dig up, I mean, they're looking for tombs, they're looking for stuff under the sand. So it wasn't like that. When it was luscious, they had everything they needed. They had the water sources, they had food sources, they had everything they needed there. So they didn't have to go out and, import from other places. They
Right.
had what they needed. Whereas now it is a desert. They do need help just to survive with, the population, and then not being able to grow and get water that's needed.
Yeah, yeah. That is really true. If you go to Egypt, like, you have no concept of how large the desert is. And of course, being all sand, they can't grow trees, so that, they can't grow their own food. They're very dependent on water for everything, as are we. But we're lucky enough to have a country with dirt and trees and everything, where
Mhm.
plants grow. So how long has Egypt been a desert, would you say? I mean, I know it's not really fair to say that, but was there
Yeah.
a catastrophe or what happened?
Oh, so there's mixed, like, let's say, reviews on what happens. But from my understanding and what I've been given information wise is that um we talked about how we're in a game zone, correct? We've talked about how you get to a certain level of awakening, you move forward, and basically you pass the game. So Egypt actually passed the game. And we don't really talk about what happens afterwards. Even with the dinosaurs, we don't talk about them actually passing the game. We just talk about they disappeared.
Oh,
Well, what happens then? What happens when you pass, or what happens when you're done the game? And so their end of the game was, everybody ascended, but they don't want the next round of gamers to come in and have total access. So, what's a more interesting game where you cover it up with sand and say, how can they survive? Or let's keep it the same way and see what they can do with all this technology already developed. Well, they saw that as a bad option. One, because they figured they'll probably figure out how to really get out the game and probably use this these sources against us. So their choice was, let's cover it with sand. They're never going to get dig through sand because when you dig through sand, what happens? It either concaves or more sand flows into the hole. So sand was a good option. And then
okay.
it already soaks up the water. It kills the plants because they're not used to sand. They needed dirt, they needed soil. So basically, sand was their option.
Okay. So I'm shocked that you said that the Egyptians ascended. In my opinion, that culture went downhill, not uphill. But
So, okay, so what happens is when we talk about ascension, it's not always the whole population.
okay.
So half of their population did ascend and half of it didn't. And like I said, when we first started this, I said we don't talk about what happens at the end. So even if they didn't ascend, there has to be an end. At some point, they're going to bring in new gamers.
Okay, so the
Does that
guys
make sense?
that did ascend, where did they go, or, like, kind of describe that to us?
Okay, so when you ascend, you either go on your next mission, which you've already put into your contract, and or you come back into the next round. For the ones that didn't ascend, they're forced to come back into the game, but as a lower character. It's basically punishment.
Okay, and it's not always the same place that they've been. So in other words,
No.
if they were Egyptian, maybe they ended up in South America or something.
Yes.
Okay,
So it's where we kind of talk about reincarnation. We don't really talk about how reincarnation happens, how it, transcends us. We talk about, okay, well, we were here at one point. Do we come in the same body? Do we do this? But when we, switch games, when we switch like stages, like I said, like Egypt, you have the dinosaurs. So each one, even if they don't ascend, they do go on to the next game. Because at a certain point, it's going to get boring to the viewers, correct? You watch the
okay,
same game over and over, you're going to get bored.
yeah,
So
yeah,
either they're going to switch it with some sort of apocalypse and say who survives, or they're going to just move on.
okay. So in the case of, let's say, Egypt, then, how did they get to stand there? Was there a tsunami? Was, like, what happened?
So the best way to describe it would be like a tsunami, but bring in the tidal waves of sand with it. Because really, where is the sand coming from? I mean, it's not complete magic where they just have sand falling from the sky. It is going to be brought in more of a natural way. So they did have a natural disaster bring it in. Um, so what happened was they started to bring it in. Some of it did get out of control. It was like, hey, this is a good idea. And then it was too much sand and the sand just kind of took over. So not the best planning. But they brought it in the tsunami form because that's the best way to bring it in. It's easy for them to create tsunamis as is. So bringing that in was pretty simple for them.
Okay,
Like I said, it just wasn't fully planned out. I mean, they just didn't prepare for how much sand they were going to bring in.
yeah.
Plus, when you don't have any soil, like anything holding the sand down, it's going to spread. I mean, you need plants, you need living things to hold the sands in place so it doesn't escape, it doesn't keep moving forward.
So basically, instead of a concentrated area, it expanded a further
Mhm.
reach than they expected because it is huge.
Yeah,
Huge.
yeah.
Is that what happened? And were the pyramids there already when that happened?
They were there before everything that we see now was there before
Right.
the sand was brought in. That's why there is a lot of uncovering, digging, and that kind of thing. Um, for the pyramids, those I mean, we already kind of talked about that, how they're made and everything. They were there for specific purposes. Part of the reason they brought in this like tsunami of sand was to hide all the machinery. So they figured if we can hide it, if we can cover it up, nobody's gonna, have questions. Well, it didn't work because one, sand does move around. So if it's a large structure like a pyramid, it's gonna be harder to really cover. You can cover a little bit, but you can't cover the whole thing.
Okay. So when all the sand was brought in, it covered up the trees, the houses, the people that were there, the
Mhm.
animals, everything.
Yeah.
So they
And then
all,
a lot of it is, we find these bodies and we say they're mummified. So one of the things is when we talk about mummification, when you're impoverished or poor, they basically make a hole and throw your body in the sand. And then that already just takes out the moisture and then you're mummified. That's what we've been told. But what if they weren't actually mummified? What if they were just covered up with the sand? And then we just made a plot twist of this is what they do. This is normal.
oh, yeah.
Because you
Wow.
always hear about nice burials for the ones that are wealth.
The wealthy, yeah. And basically what they do is they have it's a multi-week program and they take the organs out and blah, blah, blah. They wrap them and they blah, blah, blah. And then they, they're there for a long time, but the common person would not get that treatment, is what you're saying. They
Yes.
get chucked into the sand.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. That's pretty nasty. But I guess
It is.
if you're already dead, you're dead, so.
I mean, you got to think about it. What's so different from what goes on in our society now? I mean, we don't have the sand, we're not mummifying people, but people die on a daily basis and
Yeah,
they get pushed off to the side. There's, I mean, crazy things that happen in society now that shouldn't be happening, but they do. So every society has the good, the bad, the ugly.
yes,
And, part of it is, we talked about ascension, we think that everybody has to be on the same level. Everybody's going to ascend. That's not the case. So we're still going to have the good, the bad, the ugly, but the ones that are of the higher source, the higher vibration will be ascending. And those of lower energy are what's their next step. And that's basically their choice. They want to stay in this low vibrational pattern and be held back. So a society can ascend without having 100% people. We want 100% people. We don't want people to suffer. We don't want that, but it is their choice in the end.
wow. I mean, a lot of questions popping up, but I'm gonna try to stay on topic.
You're just like counting them down.
I know. Okay, so, wow. All right. So basically, a lot of death happened when that tsunami hit. The sand
Yeah.
got out of control. It created a huge desert where there should have been just a smaller one. And that's
Mhm.
been there a long time. So how long ago do you think roughly did that happen?
I'm getting out. It's over 2,000 years.
Okay.
I don't have a specific number.
Okay, so it's old. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the gods of Egypt. So again, in the temples and the pyramids, we see carvings of gods with the animal and bird heads and blah, blah, blah. We've heard all these legends and all that. And when you look at the pyramids and temples, they don't look like they were, we're going to call it man-made for the most part. So question, were these gods ETs?
Yes, they were.
And were they coming here to control the people?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
So there are some gods that were coming down because they were interested in helping and oh, what's here. Some of them came because their societies have kind of fallen. So like let's try a new place and let's see if we can help build up. So
Yeah,
not all of the gods were necessarily here to do wrong.
right,
But a lot of them did. They saw it being easy access to people that are willing to do a lot to survive. I mean, there's a lot people will do to just get through.
right. So the gods were coming, these gods, small g, really they were extraterrestrials. They had, we're going to call it supernatural powers. They had more powers than our average human knew that they had. So
Yes.
they came down here and said, "Hey, we're gonna, set ourselves up nice and cushy, and
Mhm.
we'll set ourselves up as gods and show off, and then all the people will worship us and do whatever we want." Is that kind of
Yeah.
what they said? Yeah,
So they wanted the power. They saw it being easy. Like I said, a lot of people will do a lot to just survive.
yeah,
And usually when you see somebody with, powers, you're like, oh my goodness,
yeah,
they're a god or they have these supernatural abilities. I'm definitely going to listen. So it was easy to manipulate.
yeah,
Towards the end, I mean, some of what happened in Egypt was accurate, um, bringing in more devastation, trying to get the people out of that mindset. So usually what happens within the game is there's something, a pivotal point that makes people either awaken really quickly or realize that they made a whole bunch of mistakes. So towards the end, most of the people realize like we're giving these gods a lot of power.
yeah.
We're doing a lot of stuff and we're not really getting anything from it. I mean, they still like I said, every game pretty much has the same issues, issues with food, issues with government or power in some sense. So at one point the people were kind of done, just like when we talked about Greek gods, same thing. They're at the point of, we're giving them all this power and nothing's happening.
Right,
At some
right.
point, you're a god, you should be able to do a lot more and not ask for that much. Like,
Trans
there's no balance.
Translate that to current times. All right. So we've got a controlling government who has the power. Then a catastrophe is created that only they have the knowledge and cure for, or
Mhm.
whatever the remedy for. And everyone gives away their power and control, right? They're
Yeah,
docile. And it happens over and over and over and over until the people get smart. So
yeah,
kind of the same thing.
yeah. And by the time you get smart, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So, about how long ago did these gods arrive? Like, did they come when it was green and lush, or did they come when it was sandy and dry?
Oh, they came when I was green and lush.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
don't want to come when it's sandy and dry. They they wanted luxury, and that's what they got.
Yeah.
People gave them the luxury they were looking for, and it was smart on their part, but like I said, there was no balance. If they came and they gave the people what they were looking for,
Yeah.
they had balance, it would have lasted a little bit longer.
Okay.
Like the happiness, the peace, um, because people saw the benefit to having them around.
Okay.
Whereas there are points in every game zone that people are just like, I need the balance or this isn't working.
Yeah.
We do kind of wise up at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So, how long? So they came before 2000 years ago, but about how long would you say they stayed?
Oh, they stayed for a while.
Yeah, that's what I
They
thought.
stayed for a while.
And how did they get kicked off the planet, or like what happened? Or does that depend on the individual God's story?
It depends on the individual God story. There were a few that left by choice.
Okay. Yeah, some left by choice.
And then, so like I said, not all the gods were here for negative purposes.
Right.
So ones that were here when the ascension happened, they did ascend with people. Um, Not like I said, not all of them, just like in the days now,
Yeah.
not everybody is negative. So those that were truly trying to help did actually help people get to that next level.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So I thought what I do is go through a list of like the popular gods just for fun.
Yeah,
And if you could tell us like a little bit about them, whether they were, we'll call it good or bad, what
yeah.
happened to them, that kind of stuff. So the big one is Thoth, and he's the one with the ibis or the bird head. And he's
Mhm.
supposed to be, he was semi-helpful in inventing writing and communication. So,
Okay, so what I'm seeing is he was good. He actually wanted people to push forward. Um, there are people that are going to say that he was negative and he was trying to bring more destruction and um, break, I don't know, the infrastructure or something. But what he was here for was to help people learn. He wanted them to have knowledge, and his way of doing so was through, his teachings.
communication. Yeah.
Yes, communication, because if like I said, if you look at most societies, communication has always been withheld. Um, so those mass populations didn't have access to communicate, I mean, we even have it today. A lot of people can't do basic forms of communication. So that is power. Not everybody can do it. So if he could give people power of communicating, people can understand what's going on. They
Yeah.
can read articles. It's not going to be some secret letter. So he was trying to help the people in the way he thought was best.
Okay, did he ever go astray with that plan or that help for the people?
I'm not saying he did. I'm I'm saying there were a few times where he was frustrated.
Yeah,
I mean, it happens with every society.
mhm,
People get frustrated
yeah,
after a while, especially if you're in the same error and you see this constant downfall of it, even though you're trying your best. So I do see there was some thoughts about why am I doing this? Like you could easily manipulate and change people. So there were a few times where he was on a bumpy road.
okay, okay, interesting. All right, let's go with Horus, who's depicted as a like a hawk head or a yeah. Um, so was he, we'll call it good or bad?
I'm getting mixed. Okay, so I'm seeing he started off as good, but then switched.
Okay.
It looks like he had a lot of plans, but they just weren't like they just weren't working. He was done with it. He was
Yeah,
done waiting. And I think that's gonna happen with a few other of the gods when you're waiting for a certain amount of time and you have these ideas of things going a certain way, you're gonna get fed up. I mean, it happens to everybody. You get irritated.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I do see that he did turn bad at a certain point.
He went dark. Okay.
Yeah.
How about we see like I think it's the Eye of Horus. But
Mhm.
is it the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Ra? I just blanked out. You know how you do that? Um,
Yeah.
we see that all over and on, everyone that thinks they're spiritual has that in, like anything Egyptian to them is cool, which I
Mhm.
don't agree with because there was a lot of darkness in Egypt as well, you
Yeah.
know. So is that symbol a positive symbol?
No. That is more for, so like you said, you don't always have, there was a lot of dark things going on, a lot of dark magic. It was a rough time for people. So there was a lot more of that happening. And some of the symbolism has stuck. I mean, it's a cool looking symbol. I mean, I could see why people are interested in it,
Yeah,
but the problem is we don't truly know what everything means. We're looking at symbols and trying to depict what they mean. Even if you have, uh, I forget the name of them, the people that can translate old Egyptian into, what
the
it would mean to us now.
yeah, like the
Hieroglyph.
hieroglyphics, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what their special name is, but they don't truly know.
yeah,
I mean, you can take a best guess. You can kind of go off of what you see, but at the end of the day, who is telling you this information? Because at the end of the day, that would be, interpretation or, bringing in
yeah,
information, kind of like what we're doing, we're channeling. But at the end of the day, you're telling us that this symbol means exactly this.
yeah.
And that can easily be false.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, some of the symbols that we have around today from that era are dark symbolism, and that is also why they're really popular, um, because they've switched. So even if we talk about, symbolism from different cultures, they might have meant something positive at one point, but we're able to shift into a negative light. And that's when they
Right.
really got mass population. When a symbol turns dark, that's when people know what it is.
Okay.
'Cause I
Thanks.
mean, think about it. How many positive symbols do you really know of?
Not many,
Yeah.
because pretty much everything we've been told has been inverted. Like even like say the peace sign or
Mhm.
you know what I mean? A lot of that's been inverted. So we think it's means peace, but it doesn't,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So yeah, the positives,
yeah,
the negative signs are what people have been told, because it's easier
Yeah.
to show and to get out there because it has negative connotation.
Yep. Okay. So the big story is Isis and Osiris. So Osiris is a big figure in Egypt, and he got chopped up into pieces. They put him back together and he lived. Okay, so is that story generally a true story? I mean, they were missing a piece, but
There's bits of it that were true. From what I'm getting, there was some chopping up.
oof.
Um, but it was more because they wanted to change him.
So he was a bad guy.
Mhm.
All right. So he was bad and they chopped him up, and did it change him?
Well, they tried. There, like you said, there's something that was missing. And plus, when you go through a chopping up, it's not really gonna benefit anybody. I mean, you're still going to have negative things, trauma, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it didn't work like they thought.
Okay. Okay. So that's pretty much basically his true story. So we're gonna say Osiris is not a good guy. How about Isis?
ISIS was good.
Okay.
So that there's a lot of, pros and cons. A lot of people think more the negative side with ISIS. At least that's what, I think people think.
Yeah.
Um, but I do see good.
Okay. I mean, and everyone has good and evil in them, or
Yeah.
light and dark, So we're just talking in general, like their intent was positive for the people is really what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what was their true meaning or purpose? Do
Yeah.
they really want to help people or not?
Yeah.
Um, and that's also where you have to discern too. If you don't think that's accurate, then go with your intuition.
Yeah.
A lot of people just go with, oh, this is what I've been told. Sometimes what we've been told isn't accurate. So if you don't feel like it's accurate, then go with your gut intuition because
Right.
that's usually right.
Right. How about Ra, the sun god?
He was good.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And did these gods create the pyramids themselves? Okay. Just asking the
They did
question.
not.
We're in,
No, they did not. It's so the biggest question ever is how were the pyramids created? And I just saw a hilarious video. I mean, some of you might think it's a great idea, but it's hilarious. Um, they took those big blocks and they attached basically like balloons that floated on top of them. They pushed them down a riverway, and then the river not only goes straight to the pyramids, but it goes up the pyramids. So as they're building it, they
yeah,
have a riverway to push these big, big blocks up these riverways to the top of the pyramid.
right.
What?
Yeah. I
So,
I have
so yeah.
I've seen how big these blocks are. They're they're giant, and they're basically, even with today's technology, we can't bring some of the granite was from a quarry like 800 miles south or whatever it is. We don't have the technology to do
No.
that right now. Okay. So we're taught that slaves put trees down. Now there's no trees there because it's a desert, right? They put trees down and they pulled the blocks along the trees, which kind of rolled it along, and they somehow got it up there. Are you guys kidding me? Like
Yeah.
that, we know that didn't happen. So, and the seams are precise. They're extremely precisely cut. They're flush.
Mhm.
And, they knew what they were doing when they built them,
Yeah.
and we
And
can't duplicate it now.
no, we can't. And that's part of, that ascension process. I mean,
Yeah,
they have tools that we can't even comprehend yet.
yeah,
And this isn't the only society. There's a society in, I think it's Peru. They have structures there that have precision cuts where trees and roots can't even grow between.
yeah.
We can't even do that on our sidewalks, but we're more advanced. So,
Yeah,
yeah, they had technology that we haven't even figured out yet. And part of it is they don't want us to figure it out.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, But yeah, the pyramids, I mean, the gods helped. They helped bring in people that could do this.
Yeah,
And when we talk about the pyramids, um, the, the most logical one is we had help. And
yeah,
they don't want us to think that because then we have to admit that aliens are real.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so you can get help in different ways. You can have, aliens, ET, they have, technology that's advanced. But
right,
the biggest one we keep forgetting is that there are things called elementals. There are people that can work with the natural elements
right,
and move these rocks.
right.
What if they could just naturally pick it up and they didn't have to hold it? They had these abilities. They could easily get precision because it's more on this, let's say, mystical level versus technological level.
Yeah,
So that is the most logical thing to talk about when we talk about the pyramids. We had help.
makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. All right.
And if you disagree, okay, give me some give me some comments of what you disagree with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically, were the pyramids here when these gods arrived, or were they built after?
They were built afterwards. So the gods, when they arrived, there were they were still in this stage of trying to grow, progress, and all that. So like I said, it was easy for them to kind of manipulate to get what they needed. They did have good plans with how to really develop and change the society in a positive way. But like I said, they still had these negative ideas, and that kind of took over and was some of the downfall before people got to their, are we going to ascend? Are we going to descend? That type of switch.
Right. Okay. Okay. So in Egypt, there are these obelisks, and basically there's a large one in Washington, the Washington Monument, a really tall, we'll call it a square with a pointed end. And they have them in London, they have them in key cities, okay?
Yeah.
What does that represent? Because it said it's supposed to represent part of Osiris, but is that what it is?
No, not necessarily. So when we talk about these larger scale structures, we always forget to mention that they do have powers. What about teleportation? I mean, when we talk about the pyramids, they're these massive machines. Some were made for healing, some were made for
Right.
teleportation through universe. So larger than we think, we imagine just this portal opens, but for something that can't just open a portal, you need a machine to do so. So that's where we have the larger pyramids. But these were teleportation devices for Earth. So it wasn't necessarily to get off the Earth or go to a different universe. It was just to get access to different locations. So
Yeah.
they could be ruling over one or more locations at a time.
Okay. So let's say they're in several major cities, okay, which they are. Are they still active?
Some of them, yes, they are.
Ooh,
And I don't know specifically which ones, but if you go to them, you'll be able to feel the energy.
interesting. And who controls them, light or dark right now?
Dark. Yeah.
Just
And think
as,
about who controls the city
yeah,
and then what's in the city and why
yeah,
do they want the city?
yeah,
So it goes down this kind of bumpy road.
yeah, yeah. Interesting stuff though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And then it's also sad.
Yeah, it is sad. Well, people don't know, and that's why like they think, anything. First of all, there are pyramids. We did a video on pyramids a few months ago. It's on the channels. The pyramids are all over the world. Okay,
Mhm.
so they're all over. They're in the US, they're everywhere. So there are pyramids here, and they had a multitude of uses. So if you can, probably go watch that video. It's super
Yeah.
interesting, right? But
Mhm.
yeah, so it's interesting that we don't know what these basic non-mechanical devices are for.
Yes. Yeah,
And
because they don't want you to know what they're for.
Yeah,
And
because they're using them and we don't get to. We've got to walk.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Did the priests in Egypt, I guess we'll say after the gods left, did they strive to keep the mystical knowledge to themselves? Like, did they keep all the information to themselves and not share it so they could rule? Is that what happened?
yeah. So what happened was they had this knowledge, they had these next steps, and it was easier for them to keep control. Why give, they already saw what could happen
Right.
if, you use this information to try and help benefit yourself. So they felt fit to try to do the same thing.
Okay. Okay. So basically they took power and control, and that really was a pivotal point in society, I think, too, because
It
it
was.
shifted society again, I'm going to say in a negative way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's all these pivotal points throughout each like game or society, whatever you want to call it, that really help depict how it's going to move forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, towards the end, like I said, people kind of got their ideas of what was going on. And so we have probably maybe half the population that was able to ascend before destruction.
Cool. All right. So how did how did the gods, how were they removed from Egypt, or what happened with them?
Okay, so like I said, some of them, they left purposefully. Some did go in with ascension, and then some were actually taken out.
Okay. Are there any of these gods left there in present time?
In essence, yes.
Essence,
So
but not physically.
yeah, you're not going to physically see how they looked, back then. They have transformed. Some of them are here for a purpose and they're trying to do better. But for the most part, a lot of them are no longer around here. They've gone on to their next step. But there are some that are still present.
Okay. What kind of powers did they have? Like all the usual, like could they fly, teleportation?
Hmm.
Um,
And they didn't really need they didn't really need tools to do certain things like, teleportation. They're able to access it, they're able to move fast. So they had, special gifts like, the usual. And then each one had their own specific gifts. That's why we categorize them into what they were best known for. So they
um,
did have those certain gifts,
right.
and that is why we had those classifications.
Interesting. Okay. Were these gods physically huge compared to us? Let's say we're 5 or 6 feet. Were they giant like what we see in some of the temples and the depictions?
They were larger than us, but not massive, not like, 20 foot tall, that kind of thing. They're probably about 10 feet or so.
Oh,
So I mean, you're still looking up to them. They
yeah.
are pretty big beings, but they're not really massive.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so we see in these temples and in the art also giant, like we're maybe 6 feet and they're 30 or I'm just making a number up. Are those real beings that are depicted?
Some of them, yes.
Okay.
And
And
then it's hard because some of the depictions, they show them as these massive, massive beings.
yeah,
And not all of them were. They were just displaying who was powerful in the imagery.
that's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
So I
right.
mean, yeah, like when you see something massive, you're like, okay, that's more important than these small things.
Yeah.
So that's how they depicted it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So did they have, I know we've got some of the gods that have these animal heads or whatever. But how about the elongated skull beings? Like a lot of the Egyptian rulers, the pharaohs and all that, were shown with the elongated skulls. So again, separate but related conversation, right?
They're alien
Yeah.
and
No.
they are definitely separated. They were two different species, pretty much, of beings, and they did work together. Um, mostly negative. Um, the the long skull or whatever you want to call them, most of them wanted to overtake. So, we talk about these longer crystal heads, and how much power they had and how much knowledge, but they were here for more of a darker
Right,
purpose.
right, right. I know that they've found mass graves with these crystalline skull beings in them. Like
Mhm.
there's been a bunch in Malta, which is, outside it, it's an Italian island, but they found him all over the world. So
Mhm.
they were like basically trying to take over the planet,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
some of them probably interbred with humans, like we've been
Mhm.
told.
Yeah.
And we're told that they often became bankers or whatever, or people of power, like a ruling class.
Yes, because they did have knowledge. I mean, they were very gifted,
Yeah,
just in a negative sense.
yeah,
Not many of them were in a positive light.
yeah,
Like they, when you have too much knowledge, you think normal beings are beneath you.
yeah,
And that's where they were. They were just at that point where everything else was beneath them.
right. And there are still some of those alive here on Earth today.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're kind of in hiding.
They're in hiding, but they've also figured out how to kind of transform themselves to
Right,
look normal.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Any other things we should ask about Egypt? I mean, we're only talking thousands and thousands of years, and there's so much to know, but so this is just like a quick overview, but so in every society there's good and there's bad and all of that, but I just wanted to kind of clarify it because everyone thinks anything about Egyptian is cool, high energy, high power, high vibe. Not true.
Mhm.
Not true.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part is we want to, I guess, as looking at your own society, you want to believe that at some point a society was good,
Yeah. Yeah.
that it was just all good.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part is every society has the good, the bad, the ugly. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because we could get to a place of positive, but we have, beings that are interrupting, beings that are trying to take over and trying to manipulate. And
Yeah.
that really is a downfall for societies because they're being used.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your answers. I really appreciate your
Of
time,
course.
and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.